Example, I want to go ahead and take a look at how the JavaScript code and the Node code that we have written relates to AWS Lambda. So I have an AWS account. I'm logged into the account, and under services, I'm on the Lambda service. And that's where I'm working from right now. So you can see I have no functions here, and nothing is really configured. I'm going to actually go over to the API Gateway. And I think I do have a API built from the daytime section. I guess not in the Ohio region. I have it built in the Virginia region. So this is my MATC demo, and I don't know why it's MATS demo, but I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And that's kind of the starting point, is I just kind of starting from a clean slate. So I'm in the Ohio region. I am going to have to be in the correct region. But my starting point is those two services. So AWS Lambda is where I'm going to write my function definition. So if I was comparing this to your project 3, I might have a Lambda function to get all of your tasks. And then I might have another Lambda function to create a new task. And I might have another Lambda function to delete a task. So the functions would reside here. But there's no way to access those functions from outside of AWS unless I configure API Gateway to allow access to those Lambda functions, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new function to get all of my tasks. So I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to author it from scratch. My function name is going to be all tasks, and it's going to be in node 12. One thing that I want to note about this is that a lot of the permissions are already set up for you, so it's going to create a new role with basic Lambda permissions for me. It's already done for me. So a lot of the permissions are transparent to me as I'm working through this AWS console. And while that's getting created, just to clarify that point, while I'm talking about how some of those permissions and roles are transparent to you, there's another service within AWS called IAM, and IAM creates users and roles and permissions for those roles to access services. So if I was outside of AWS and I was using the AWS SDK, then obviously I'd have to deal with IAM a little bit more. Okay, so the way all tasks is set up right now is that when I run this, it's going to execute this code. So I have an event handler, so we're exporting this handler. And the handler is just an event. So it's an asynchronous event, and you'll see that it is generating a response and returns the response hello from Lambda. We can get that up and running. So what I want to do is first just get this up and running so that we can see what it's going to look like and verify that things are working and how to test it. So the way I'm going to test it is up at the top, there's this test button. I'm going to go ahead and click it. And it's asking me for a template, hello world template. I'm creating a new test event. I have to name my test. So I'm going to call my test all tasks test. And my request body has to be a JSON request body. So I'm going to leave that JSON object there, and I'm going to create that test body. And now you'll see when I test this, what happens is it gives me an execution result. So you'll see that I get a response saying the status code is 200 and the body is hello from Lambda. So I am getting the data that I was expecting from my event handler. Okay, so we can kind of work from there. So we have a test set up so that it's going to execute our code. All we have to do at any point in the future is just click this test button. It'll execute our code within Lambda. Okay, so I want to change this event handler a little bit so that we have a little bit more detail. Most of the time when I write events in Lambda, there's 3 parameters that are incoming, and I won't get into too much detail about these, but the event, the context, and the callback. The event will have any kind of incoming parameters, so the request body will be in the event. The context will include any kind of authentication that you've done. So we can set up these services so that the user has to authenticate against a certain user pool, and that'll be given to us in the context. And then the callback, if I execute the callback, what'll happen is it'll allow me to return my response. Okay, so if I just change this around, I want to change this so that my callback gets executed. And the callback takes two parameters. The first one is an error, and then the second one is the actual payload or the data that you're sending back. So we're always going to execute the callback with no exception, unless there was an exception, but in this case we're just hard coding values and a string, and we're sending that response back. So I'm going to test this now. If I test it again, right now you'll see that I still get hello from Lambda, even though I've made changes. What happened is, if I say my version of hello from Lambda, cubs stink from Lambda, and you'll see that if I test it, I'll still get hello from Lambda because I haven't saved my code. So I saved the code, tested again, and now I get cubs stink from Lambda. And I don't know why I didn't get all of the Lambda. You'll notice I just get lamb. That's bizarre to me that I am only getting I must have saved it kind of in an intermediate state is my only guess. So now you'll notice that I get from Lambda. I took off the exclamation point so I could save it. Okay, so this isn't very interesting. What I'd like to do is I'd like to send back tasks. So if I'm sending back tasks, ideally I'd be integrating with a database. And in order to integrate with a database, I'd probably use an AWS database like RDS or Dynamo. And in order to use those, then I really have to get into the AWS SDK. So for the time being, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm just going to set up a constant saying, here's tasks, and the tasks that I have are going to be a collection of tasks that include an ID and a description. So walk the dog. And then I'm just going to copy and paste that to create a couple more tasks. Okay, so I'm going to have 3 tasks. ID 2 will be take out the trash, and ID 3 will be get groceries. Okay, so just standard JavaScript stuff. We're creating an object, and instead of sending back this hard-coded string, what I want to do is I want to send back those tasks. One note about this, anytime I send a response body, it has to be stringified. I can't just send back plain JavaScript. I can't send back JSON data. So it has to be stringified. So that's already taken care of for us in the template. So I generate a response, I get a status code of 200, the body, and then I execute my callback. There are no exceptions, and I send back my response. I save this, I can test it, and then you'll see in the execution results, if I scroll down, that I am getting my JSON response. Okay, so this is my Lambda function that I want to allow to get executed from the web. I want a JavaScript client to be able to access this particular Lambda function. In order for that to happen, I have to take this Lambda function and make it publicly available on the internet through API Gateway. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to the API Gateway service. Okay, and there's a couple of ways to do this. So you'll see this HTTP API gateway. So this API type, and it's in beta. It actually is so much better, and I say that because basically it gets rid of the need to manage your CORS policy, so that it's basically cross-origin resource sharing is CORS. So what ends up happening is if I build an API and I have it on my domain, Modern browsers are going to block requests from other domains to access my API unless I implement a CORS policy. This HTTP API, this beta version of it, it gets rid of the need for all of that. Okay, it handles all of that complexity for you. So let's start there, and then we'll, if you scroll down, we're going to build a RESTful API. Okay, so to start with, though, we're going to use this HTTP API. So I'm going to build a new API. So this is going to be my MATC demo. And then I'm going to go next. And it's asking me to add routes. It's not going to let me use a route yet. Interesting. I think I need a route. Oh, here's the integration that I need. I want to integrate with Lambda, and then I should have all tasks, and then it'll allow me to configure a route with that integration. So, as I was mentioning at the beginning of this, in Lambda, I might have had 3 different functions, one for all tasks, one for add a task, one for delete a task. I would add those 3 integrations right here. And then when I hit next, I'm going to map methods. So get's going to go to the integration target all tasks. And it's asking me what path do I want. So I'm going to call it tasks. Okay, so that's going to be my route, and it's going to go to all tasks. If I had another integration, so add task, I could say the post method is going to go to the add task. And if I had a delete, I could say the delete is going to go to the delete task. Okay, so that should be set up. Stage names. So right now, this is another nice thing about this HTTP API beta is I don't have to worry about staging, but we'll talk about that in a second here, and it's going to automatically deploy my code to that stage. It lets me review it, and then I'm going to go ahead and create it. And if I click on this, you'll notice I get an error saying it's not found, but if I go to tasks, then I get the tasks that I had created from my AWS Lambda function. Okay, so this gateway is all set up and life's good. I can come in and edit this. I can go into the details, possibly. There we go. So here's my MATC demo. I have this default. CORS is not allowed right now. I want to configure CORS. I thought it automatically asks me to configure CORS. No methods are allowed, no origins are allowed, no headers are allowed. I thought it automatically added a few. So the origin that I want is going to be star. The method that I want is going to be the get. And then also options. So we don't necessarily talk about this very often, but modern browsers, if I'm using that cross-origin resource sharing, what happens is when I make a request, other than gets, I think gets, it'd be fine. But with CORS, what happens is it does a pre-flight check, is what they call it. And basically, if I have API hosted on one domain and another domain is trying to access my API, what'll happen is the browser will reach out to my domain and it'll make an HTTP options request. And the options request basically says what's allowed, what's not allowed. So that happens. That's that pre-flight check to say, is this okay? And then after we get the okay that, yes, you can post content, you can delete content, you can update content, all that stuff, then your browser would allow that request to go through. The allow headers, I just want the content type. And that should be okay. Nor origins are allowed. This is still not what I want. I think I may have to put this in single quotes. Application/JSON. And save that. And I still don't think that's necessarily right. We'll try it. Okay, so if I go to the API Gateway, I click on this, we can all see that I can access tasks. That's great. So from my domain, I'm accessing the task. That's not a problem. But if I take that URL and I move that into a JavaScript client, so I'm going to go ahead and open up Atom. And I'm going to start not with plain text, but with HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and start with HTML, and I'm going to call this my JavaScript client accessing an API gateway. Okay, and the idea here is that I want to execute some JavaScript. So the JavaScript that I want to execute is I'm going to have a URL. So the URL is that URL that's hosted in the API gateway. And I'm going to fetch that URL. And then when I do get that data back, I want to convert it to JSON. And we're going to get the implicit return there. And then we have our JSON data. Then I should be able to just take our tasks that we get back and log them to a console. Okay, so there's a lot going on with this JavaScript, but it should be a valid test. So I'm going to try to run this from localhost. So I'm going to go ahead and save it in my documents directory as API demo.html. Okay, so that's my JavaScript and HTML. And then I want to access it, so I'm going to localhost API demo.html. And the idea here is if I inspect this, you can tell that I'm getting blocked by this CORS policy. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. So let's try this again. Okay, so I'm going to delete this API. And I think because I was using that HTTP API, if I pay attention enough, when I build a new API, so I want to build a new API, I'm going to US East, all tasks, so kind of what we did before. My API name is going to be MATC demo, just like before. My method get is going to go to all tasks. My stage is good. And when I review and create, I want to say that there's an option to enable CORS, and I'm not seeing it. Yeah, it looks like they've already changed it. And honestly, I went through this yesterday. So this HTTP API. We could configure CORS right now, and that would be fine. But I want to do that in our traditional RESTful API. So we'll be able to take that over to the HTTP API. You can take these same concepts over there, but I'm more comfortable in the RESTful API. It used to be that there was just a button that you could click to enable CORS and life would be good. Obviously it's not there, so I'm going to start with a RESTful API. I want to create a new API. I have to give it my name, so to do would be great. The endpoint's going to be regional. And the way this is set up right now is my URL endpoint. So if I'm talking about tasks, so if I want to say that my RESTful API, the endpoint is tasks, then I have to create a resource that's named my API endpoint. Okay, so I'm going to create an API endpoint, which I'm going to call tasks. And it says you can enable API Gateway cores. I'm not going to do that yet, okay? So I can create the resource. And then this is my API endpoint. Then what I want to do is under that endpoint, I want to create a method. So if this is a RESTful API, I have a resource, which is tasks. Then I have to say which HTTP methods my resource responds to. And I respond to it with methods. So the method that I want is a get. And then I can configure that to say, yep, I'm doing Lambda integration, and I want you to go to all tasks. Permissions. And then I get this set up. Then what I want to do is I want to go to my tasks resource, and I want to enable cores. And you can see what access we're allowing. We're allowing access to the get, and we're allowing access to the options. So I'm going to enable cores and replace existing headers. And what that does is it creates that options URL. And then this is kind of getting into the weeds here, but really what this is the request and response pipeline. Okay, so we can see all of that. And if I look at this options file, or this options method, this integration response is where I'll see all of the headers. So all of the access control allow headers to respond to cores. Okay, so it's going to allow requests from anywhere. It's going to allow just two methods, get and options, and then it's going to allow different headers, so content type, authorization, API key, things like that. And that's it. Those are the only things that it'll allow. So if I have a HTTP header that's different than those, or a method that's different than get or options, then cores is going to block that request. Okay? So that's in the integration response. So let's say I define the get and it's great, and then later I come through and I want the put defined. I can come back into this integration response and allow puts. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, I have my API built, but I want to deploy it out to the web, so there's another action that I have to take, which is to deploy the API. Okay, so to deploy it, I have different stages, so I could have like a development stage, a demo stage, a production stage. So I'm going to create a new stage called development, and I'm going to deploy this. Okay, and if I click on this development, you'll see I get this missing authentication token. Really what it's telling me is I'm at the wrong URL endpoint. Okay, so you'll see if I go to tasks, life's good. Because I have cores enabled on this, I should be able to go to my Atom browser and change the URL. Okay, so now I'm hitting my new API gateway. And now, if I go to my JavaScript client where I'm accessing that, you'll notice that I do get the tasks that I was expecting. Okay? So, as far as costs go, API Gateway will allow you to make 1 million requests. So I guess maybe I started in the wrong spot. AWS Lambda will allow you to execute 1 million function calls a month for free. So if I am under that limit, so if I have a application and I'm making function calls and I'm under 1 million, it's free. And then API Gateway is also free, and it's limited to computing resources. So I've never seen anyone near the threshold of moving out of the free service. Okay, so these things are awesome to build your APIs. Okay. As you saw with Lambda, this is just our traditional JavaScript. Okay, so this is just our traditional JavaScript. We're creating tasks, we export it. life's good. If I wanted to play around with this, so I'm going to break things now. If I wanted to play around with this, so let's say I was in the process of figuring out how I wanted to add a task. So right now I have this constant called tasks. I'm going to make it just a variable. And the idea is that I'm going to expect the user to pass in a task. Okay, so the way I'm going to get the task is I'm going to have access to the request body. So I'm going to take this JSON and parse it. So I'm expecting the event body to be some JSON. One thing about the event body is it has to be a stringified version of JSON, so it's not just plain JSON. So that'll cause us some issues. I'm going to get the description. So I'm going to assume that the description is passed in, and this shouldn't be minus equals. I'm going to get the description, so I'm going to say go to the request body, and there should be a description that's passed to me. And then, assuming that there is, what I want to do is I want to say, here's my new task. It's going to be something with an ID equal to 100. And then the description is going to be that passed in value. Okay, so I have this new task, and then I can push it onto tasks. Okay, so this is the way I want my function to work. And then I'm just going to output tasks. So I'll save that. And obviously my test is going to be broken now. So if I test this, you'll see that I get an error saying I'm getting an unexpected token in JSON at position 0. And what that really means is when I try to parse this data is when it's failing. So I'm trying to parse the event body and there is no JSON data at position 0. So it's failing on that JSON.parse. So what I want to do is I want to configure my test event. Okay, so the JSON body that I want to send, so the body that I want to send over, I want a JSON object. I'm going to send the body over. And the way I'm going to send the body over is I'm going to send over JSON. Okay, and then I have to escape all the double quotes. So the description needs to be there. I need escaped double quote, a colon, and then corresponding value for my description. So again, I need to escape it to have my double quote. I need to escape again and have a double quote. And in between here would be my description. So maybe I want to watch TV. Okay, so this is my body. And then you can see how I started the body as an object, and then I want to end the body as an object. Okay, so this is my JSON stringified data. I can save it. And now if I test this, okay, so now you'll notice that my execution result, the status code's 200. If I look at the body, you'll see that now I have this description, which is watch TV. I'm able to add that new element. So the way I'd really code this is I'd probably have tasks in maybe a DynamoDB, which is another AWS service. I'd get all the tasks from there, and then I could push a new task onto it, and I would have multiple functions. So I wouldn't have added this to the all tasks. I would have added this to add task, where I'm expecting you to pass a JSON body that has a description of a task. Okay, so you're going to pass in that task, and then from there I'll take it and I'll attach it to an API Gateway endpoint of a post, and then I can insert the new record. Okay, so ultimately to build the API that Project 3 would have required, we would have had 3 different Lambda functions, and then our API Gateway would have had different endpoints based on the different HTTP verbs. And then also in the API Gateway, we would have had to open up that options to allow different methods. So besides just the options and the get, we would have needed options and get and put and post and delete, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is kind of the process that we're going to go through using AWS and Lambda and API Gateway.